move in that direction. I think I agree with Cherry. As a committee, collectively, policy JCE requirements that we have, I think. All right.
Also think that sometimes our priorities need to be a little flexible, because sometimes we will have, this is my priority A, but when it comes to this part of the boundary, priority B will be my priority. So we need to be also tolerating while discussing this. It's not a hard line, walkability versus so and so. So yeah, I do believe we need to be open about what our priorities are and how are we going to through the process with them in mind.
All right, before I go to you, Michael, Tika?
Yep, oh, that's really loud. Oops, sorry. I definitely agree that we need to have a conversation about that. Like Yasmin said, we should sort of think our priorities should be. I think that, I mean, specifically what comes to mind is when I'm looking at like some of the working maps that, or working map A's and A and B that have had transportation analysis done on them. There are pockets of areas where like for Finley, for example, it can be split up to made, like the walkable areas, it could be split up so that the walkable areas of Finley go to Stoller, and then the parts that can be bused can go to Timberland. And I feel like we've had this rhetoric going around, hard and fast rule of not breaking feeder patterns. And while I do agree that breaking feeder patterns is obviously not ideal for the development of young kids, I definitely think that it's something that's sort of inevitable just because of the way the schools are planned out. And I don't completely saying no to breaking feeders is like a really good way to go about this process. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about what Jason said about the transportation budget. I think you said that the district made it seem that like by creating like a for the schools that doesn't really fit with like the most feasible transportation idea, we're taking away money from teachers, and I don't think that's what the district intended at all. I think the district was in fact our final proposal, and I definitely think that transportation is a huge factor in that. And
okay, we're not doing the demonstrations.
And I in no way think that the district was trying to lead us to a certain opinions on that.
Okay. All right, Mike?
I guess I'll just be the odd man out here. I can appreciate the interest in having a discussion. But here's what I see happening. We are not going to agree on that. And now we've taken an entire meeting to discuss priorities, when I think my suggestion would be that our priorities are actually going to come out with respect to the edits we suggest to the maps. And so I think that our time is better spent in that area rather than just simply speaking about priorities.
All right, Marty, I'm looking at you.
I actually second what Michael said. We all have our own individual priorities. I know I look at the map, and the first place I look is where I'm at. So I think making edits accordingly will probably bring their priorities to the forefront, and that's where we need to start moving.
All right, before we get to you, Monica, Sean?
I agree with Michael. Making edits to some of the maps, it'll bring out some of the priorities also.
Okay, and Monica?
I mean, I wonder if we could just find a middle ground. Where does it fit if we put the scorecard together and say, this one's good for this, but then it has this thing, and then we can make those best map for each one based off of what our values are, and then
And others where I could say, boy, this is not going to work for me. And I would like to just see a general head nod or a head shake. All right, again, not decisive. All right, then I'm going to be decisive. Since I'm managing the project, I'm going to force you into playing my game, and it's my ball. So, it's a joke, I swear, please. I'm trying to be funny. So, here's what I'd like to do. We've got about 30 minutes before we'll start public testimony at map A. And I'd like to hear from you in a kind of quick fire way the pros, the cons. I'm going to.
This is my favorite of the three, and the reason is I agree with Ritika, we can't be blanket in our statements, but I can pick values on top of each other. So I'd say I would prefer to minimize feeder splits into high school over overall transportation. So I like that about it. I also think it gets us as and in 2025 with some outliers that we could work on. So I think I see us moving out.
Okay, Abhijit.
I agree with John. Map A would be my starting point as well, and whether what we do with the friendly walkability, but addressing friendly walkability in map A is very straightforward, and I can fire off those suggestions right now, but I would wait to see how the committee goes. And with that, the south part of the district that has improvements, we can work on that without impacting anything else.
Jennifer, I'm calling you earlier, so here you go.
For map A, something I would like to see is what it would look like if Rachel Carson stayed at Five Oaks. By 2025, it looks like we would have capacity, and they have such a beautiful garden there for them to use. They're close to some of the other resources for that school.
So I would like to kind of see what it would look like numbers-wise if Rachel Carson stayed.
Bill?
Okay. So I think map A is a very good place to start for us. And talking about the values for the JC policy, I think I'll second what John said about the feeder patterns and keeping that together. I think in totality, the way I look at it is such that we could split the JC policy criteria we have here into two different categories. One is the category that really focuses on the experience that the kids have while they're in school. And the second one is the category that focuses on the experience they have on their way to school. And I think the student body composition, the space within the school, and also the feeder patterns speak to the experience the students actually have while they're in school. And I believe, personally, I would value those criteria collectively as more valuable to me in my eyes to things like proximity or transportation cost, which basically focuses on a lot on the experience they have on their way to school. So I think map A for me is also a very good place to start.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
So just running through specific concerns with map A, I mean, my large concerns center around, you know, the Meadow Park, Cedar Park. It's what I said last time. When I think about the factors of policy JC, the resulting boundary for Cedar Park doesn't make a lot of sense in a number of categories. New information I don't know that we had last time. If you look at the free and reduced lunch numbers between Meadow and Cedar, they get very imbalanced in relation to the mean of the district. And if you compare it to, say, what map B is, if I remember, yes, by keeping Barnes as part of Meadow Park, it will balance that out better, as well as address a number of the concerns I raised last time about the commute problems and the cohesiveness of that community. I'm also concerned here with what I'll call the three-way split of the Cedar Mill area, not Cedar Mill Elementary, but to have, you know, right in a row you've got West TV, Cedar Mill, Terra Linda, all together in one school now, splitting up three ways. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to make, if Terra Linda's not going to be as part of Timberland, which is sort of impractical in a number of these maps, it should stay at Cedar Park, which enables maybe some other moves elsewhere. I also don't see at the point to the split up in Springville, it's not enough kids to justify the breaking of that policy. Those are my high-level thoughts.
Yeah, Finn?
I like actually the feeder patterns in this map, especially that it addresses the issue of the Oak Hill split in high school. And as we have heard from public comment before, that the very small number of kids from Oak Hills on the eastern side of Bethany Boulevard who end up not knowing a lot of people in Sunset High School. This map actually addresses this point with more kids will be with, they know more kids in Meadow Park who are going to be with them in Sunset.
Okay, thank you. All right, before I move on to map B, I'm looking over here to my left. Christy.
I have some issues with map A in the sense that free and reduced lunch and equity at Mountain View is a concern because it increases so dramatically to almost the highest in the district. Also, Timberland and Stoller diversity and socioeconomics are much lower than what Stoller is now, and so the way both maps A and B have this issue and is one of the policy criteria. So that's one thing that.
What? Come on.
You guys don't need to apply. It's okay. But I think that that's something that's one of my primary concerns with MAP A. Also, I know Divya doesn't appear to be here, but I share her concern about the split at Stoller between Westview and Sunset, and that a very small portion of Jacob Wismere is going to be split off and go to Sunset. And having a more equal split at Stoller is something that I think is important, and hopefully that could be resolved by adjusting the walkable areas for Findlay going to Stoller.
All right. I'm not seeing any other new cards. Before we go to map B, anybody going once, twice, and Ritika?
I just have a question. For Meadow Park, is the actual enrollment going to be 785, or is there going to be there's not going to be a similar program at Meadow Park? Just asking. That it does include? Okay.
Yeah.
And then as for what Christy said about the Sunset Westview split from Stoller, I definitely agree that, again, I think that we should be adding the walkable areas that Findlay has to Stoller to Jacob Wismere, just because Jacob Wismere is it's like, I think 200, 300 kids, and I mean, I went there, so like I know that without the Findlay kids, the transition to Sunset would have been much harder. So I definitely agree with that.
Okay, Charisse.
I agree with most of the statements that have been made, and just so everyone knows my personal priorities, I have a definite concern towards middle to high school feeder patterns. I have it to equity across the district and to walkability. So those are my main 3 areas, so that all of you know. On this map, I have concerns with one elementary school that feeds into Highland Park, ends up at Southridge. That's going to be a small group of kids going into a pretty big school. I don't know if there is a way to address that. Other than that, I think most of my concerns have been addressed.
Okay, we're going to move to map B here. And Ritika and Charisse, I'm presuming you're... all right, Marty, again.
On the free and reduced lunch numbers, what does the district consider a substantial shift? What number have they kind of said is a large shift?
Well, when you change a population dramatically, where say you're at 20-30% and you go to and you double it, that's a seismic change, and there isn't a hard and fast rule on what is too much, but it is trying to look at across the district. Can you balance that the population across the district, and if you can't, then are you creating a substantially different environment? So in some cases, I believe Five Oaks, its free reduced lunch dropped by half or more, whereas I think Meadow Park increased by half. So those, one's a great impact, the other one's not. And so really it's trying to, the number will always change, but you don't want to, create a dramatic shift. And I'm not answering your question in the sense of saying, 10%, 5%, some number. There really isn't a clear point in saying that. Map B. Michelle, you haven't spoken on map A, so I'm looking at you first to kick us off on B.
Well, in terms of free and reduced lunch, I consider B to be quite a bit of an improvement over A, mostly in that it looks like nobody will go over 50%, which I think is great. the feeder patterns that were very concerning. And I guess my sticking point is Barnes. Over and over again, I get to everything else and I come to Barnes. And I guess I don't understand why Barnes was split the way that it was into Sunset and Beaverton. Do we have any, was that to improve, socioeconomic diversity or ethnic diversity? Okay. How does the Barnes community feel about that? Are they happy? Like, when we talked to the McKay community, they were happy with the split, it seemed, the Whitford-Conestoga split. And that surprised me a little bit, but if that's what they want, that's great. How does Barnes feel? Does anybody know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to speak with the principals at both Barnes and at Sunset High School, and we can report back on that.
If I can just answer that really very quickly, having talked to people on that previous committee, people there extensively, it was walkability. That area is walkable to Sunset. The committee prioritized that to create that split and get them to walk to Sunset. Apparently so, but that was absolutely the reason.
Marty?
So for map B, for me, I am not a fan of the fact that Highland Park and Meadow Park are broken up in 3 high schools. That is my biggest, one of my problems with working map B. And if we move forward with working map B, I would want that addressed.
Okay. Jason?
So, concerns here, the split up of the Pirate Park neighborhood, I don't, again, I don't think we should be introducing splits up there. I think we've seen maps to get those 3 schools into Stoller where it works, so I would not be in favor of that. Same concerns previously. You've got the 3-way split of the Cedar Mill area. This map does a nice job of creating a cohesive boundary around 5 Oaks. In my opinion, it's at the expense of the lack of that at Meadow Park. You've got some long commutes and pulling a school that's never been a part of that area. Quickly on the idea of the 3-way splits, as I mentioned last time, I'm in agreement it's not ideal. I have yet to see something in any of these maps that makes me feel like we can do a good job of addressing it with the middle school boundaries. Again, for me, the Meadow Park 3-way split was done deliberately as part of the high school boundaries, and should it be fixed, that's the place to do it.
Okay. Christy?
All right, I have several issues with map B. First, again, I think the diversity and equity for Stoller and Timberland is still really low compared to the rest of the schools. So while it is improved from map A, it's still not great. The bigger issue for me right now is that Cedar Park, Highland Park are both shown to be significantly under capacity. 500, 600 students. And that is just not feasible at all. And then on the other side, Whitford is significantly over capacity. And they don't have portables or the ability to go over capacity at all. So I feel like map B does not improve over map A and enough to, I guess I like map A better than map B for those reasons.
Okay. All right. Monica?
I think I second a lot of that. The numbers between the schools start separating in terms of just the capacity numbers, so we're kind of working away in that direction, especially for, like you said, the lower capacity and the upper capacity.
All right, anybody over here on this side, on the east side of the room? Okay. Sure. Okay. Divya is watching from out of town, and so she has a few comments on map B that I'll read here pretty quick. She said the same thing that you did, Christy, about Cedar Park and Highland Park being well below 800. Meadow Park is over capacity, even with portables, so we need to adjust Meadow Park if we move forward. Dual language program needs change due to Barnes going to Cedar Park instead of Meadow Park. She had the same comments about the free reduced lunch and lack of diversity at Timberland and Stoller. I think, Christy, you mentioned that. And she is saying that Map B doesn't work from a walkability average, proximity average. So those were her comments on B. Monica, did you want to ask another question, or okay? All right, now we're going to move to Map C. Mike, I'm going to look at you. Folks, you're just taking time out of public testimony. You're just taking time out of public testimony. So, John.
Thanks, Stephen. For Map C, the one thing I do like about it, and I alluded to it earlier, is it is a different look, and so I do like that, so I would be willing to continue to entertain it. If we do, though, the couple points I'd make is, to the question we had earlier, it does have significant shifts, using a loose term, in free and reduced lunch eligibility in Cedar Park and Five Oaks, so I think that's a concern or something we have to talk about. I would also strongly encourage us to look at keeping an elementary school together over the ease of bus route. So for example, I would suggest that we reunite Shoals Heights and any other places where we can keep a split, not to happen just for bus route splits.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mike?
I tend to gravitate towards Map A, but just some observations about Map C. I struggle a little bit with still it making sense for Springville to come way down to Five Oaks. So that part stands out to me. The Rachel Carson going to Whitford, now that I hear about why that might not make sense, it certainly stands out to me. It does not meet the objective in the sense that Stoller is still at 100% in 2021 versus 90%. I think that could be changed with SUMA moving, but that's something that has to be considered. Obviously, the plus is transportation is apparently more favored on this map, but those are just some of the observations.
Okay. Monica.
I'm curious about the move of Whitford Suma to Highland and then Rachel Carson to Whitford. So if I look at the numbers, I think that's like 120 out for 180 in. You're kind of pretty close to making a small adjustment, but huge program shifts for both schools. So I wonder if that's really value added or if that's more work for these schools to have to comprehend that change just for 60 students delta.
Okay, good question. Jason.
In my mind, the issue with Map C is that it is completely overemphasizing one aspect of one factor of the policy. I just don't see addressing every walkable space as consistent with policy as it exists today. It doesn't matter what we all think the policy should be. We know what it is, and it's not to always allow walkability. It's not to minimize transportation costs. Again, as noted, the long commutes created, and again, I look at the Meadow Park boundary. It doesn't seem like a cohesive community. What I would say, I'll note about all of the maps, and maybe this one more than any, I offered last time as a measuring stick what I called map 5A, which consisted of a very minimal set of changes, and said we need to really, if we're going to make broader changes, we need to really be making sure they all make sense and are welcomed by the community. And I think all three fail that measurement. This one by the largest margin.
Okay, Abhijit.
As Mike said, map A is also where I tend to gravitate, but few things that really stick out to me for map C. First is the change of high school boundaries that are recommended. That is totally out of the scope for the committee, and that's like changing rules in fourth quarter, since you mentioned Super Bowl. Start a new game. I mean, if you want to change high school boundaries like that, get it approved, get the board objective, get a new committee, and let's do that differently, right? That's clearly outside the scope. The second thing that is really odd in this map is once you decide to feed the entirety of Springville out of Stoller and into Five Oaks, then why do you have to split the smaller elementaries of Rock Creek and Findlay? That makes no sense. I mean, yeah, you could have kept the Rock Creek whole feeding into Five Oaks and Findlay whole feeding into Stoller. So that is does not pass the eyeball test. And again, here also SUMA is prioritized over elementary schools, and I think options program will are options. And so I just wanted to come back to one comment for Jennifer is in map A, if we choose to keep Five Oaks, we will have to split. I mean, we can accommodate that with a split of Rock Creek, because in 2021 the numbers will not match. And again, my preference would be to keep the elementary as a whole, but we can decide that, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Before I move to Abdul, Mr. Beaver wanted to ask a question.
I'm sorry. I've heard a couple times now talking about long commutes, and I'm looking at map C, B, and A, and I guess I'm confused about what you're referring to. Could somebody explain to me what long commute you're referring to?
So I mean, very specifically, for one example, on C, to go from Springville all the way down to Five Oaks is an unusually long commute. Again, my measurement going doorstep to doorstep relative to what the average one is across the district. I can give you other examples, but that's one that's come up very fast.
And I see that one, and that one leaps out at me. But when I look at the area, when I'm looking at C and A and B, I'm looking at the Meadow Park area, the northeast part of Meadow Park, and A is a further commute than that same area going to Five Oaks. When I look at map A and B, the the Meadow Park northwest area, where the little Timberland thumb is, that's a further commute than map C, where they're both going right into Timberland. So those are what's leaping out at me, and I'm just wondering what, I'll grant you that and see that top one, that is. But the rest of them, when I look at those other three areas, I don't see it. And just to clarify one other thing, we talked about the Shoals Heights split and making a right turn, a left turn. Yeah, that's true, but I'll tell you what the big thing is. Right down there at Shoals Heights and 175th, they're going to get bombarded with homes. That's going to be such a dense area, and for us to just quickly pop out 175th and go straight up, which is very easy. It's only 2 lanes, but there's not a lot of traffic versus fighting south Shoals Heights all the way in there and then trying to cross left over either Blackbird or do it. So yeah, that's the primary thing. We haven't even started to see that density yet. So that was a good natural break there. That was the reason why. So I was just trying to get an idea.
Craig, I didn't quite follow. So I'll grab you after the meeting. I mean, another one I need to look at would be, you look at the far east end of Barnes, and again at that whole boundary. That's an extraordinarily large area of the district that's pink. But anyway, I'll grab you after the meeting because I do want to take a look at the ones you mentioned.
All right, so let's go to Abdul, and Divya has sent a few comments, and I'll read those next.
Okay, map C for me, I think really looking at map C and similarly with map B, there's a lot of underutilization in Cedar Park, and I think the stolen numbers is still over 1,000. I think those are concerning for me, and I think those two maps actually do not meet our objectives in that respect.
Thank you. All right. Reading here quickly on this, and then we'll wrap up with comments here. She says map C is maximizing walkability, hence reducing costs. It brings the best equity to Stoller and Mountain View, or best equity to Stoller and Mountain View also looking better. All the maps we have seen so far put Stoller below 10%. Let's see, Stoller is at 84% with portables, which hoping will not be required after Sato development is complete. All schools well balanced in terms of students residing on site. Stoller feeds 25% of Sunset, giving friends to Jacob Wismer. She is concerned about Highland Park and seeing a three-way split. And she was thinking that could it be resolved by moving Fir Grove to Beaverton High School? Is that something the district can consider as well? All right, Charisse.
We were just being nice to one another.
Okay, so no fighting.
I just want to say in reference to the comment about the elementary and the high school and the boundaries and the comment that was made about it being out of our purview, I disagree with that. It is written in number 4 that if it is warranted and there are minor adjustments that need to be made, that we should look at them, and I think it's within our purview. If it's within the direction of we are doing something that benefits the community, I think we would be remiss not to look at some of those.
All right.
Christy.
Yes. To be honest, I like map C the best. It,
okay.
Come on.
Please.
I know there's,
Please.
I like map C because even though, yes, some schools changed their, the percentages of free and reduced lunch, overall, when you look at all of the numbers across the schools, it feels much more balanced than some of the other maps. So that's one thing I like. The other is that Cedar Mill, Terra Linda, and Bonnie Slope are a very tight-knit community, and you guys,
You're all going to lose your time.
and I have concerns about sending Terra Linda, splitting up the Cedar Mill community into 3 different schools.
Okay.
So that is the, and I also wanted to say that even though this map was generated based off of improving transportation and walkability, I think it also meets criteria for several other of the policy JC. So I think that is not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, thank you. All right, Jason, is yours up? Okay.
So just to chime in about the high school, I feel strongly this is outside of our purview. Having sat through the discussion at the board meeting when the objections were approved, it was promised to be a few small set of grid codes. It was not changing an entire elementary school. Believe me, I've got, would you first say, a number of interests in seeing the high school boundaries changed. I'd love to see it. It should be a separate process. To spring this on the community at this late a date, it would not be well received.
Okay, so with that, we're going to stop the discussion here for For the moment, we're going to move into public testimony. As I said before, we will call the names. As your name is called, if you would please come up and grab a seat up here in the front row that's reserved for the speakers. So, John Reed of McKay, Mary Beth Piccirilli of looks like West TV, Michelle Carver, Oak Hills, Min Pan Lee of Springville, Samir Ruwali of Findlay. I apologize, I'm just going to do a first name here, Anon of Jacob Wismer, Kelly Rich of Terra Linda, Sharish of Sato, and Amanda of Rock Creek. Okay, if you give me a moment here. Okay, so we have our 2-minute clock. We are going to roll right through here. So, John of McKay, please come on up.
Good evening, my name is John Rigg. I represent a large number of families at the McKay in the Conestoga neighborhood. I'll walk over to up here really quick to point out the area that I'll be discussing right now. It's this area that is green in A, C, and purple in B. This area right here, referred to as a peninsula or almost perhaps an island. Kevin raised concerns at the last meeting about in regards to proximity, accessibility, walkability, and I won't repeat those, but those are very valid concerns that we have of moving that neighborhood from the Conestoga to the Whitford area. One of them is, if you look at the McKay boundary, it is kind of long and skinny anyways, and so there's more of a natural connection with the community there where we're at in that area just south of Schultz Ferry, next to Conestoga, Southridge, that area there. And I would want to continue that continuity there within that neighborhood. The issue of overcapacity, map B, where it does have that in Whitford, has Whitford in both the 2021 and 2025 as overcapacity, and as you know, Whitford doesn't have the ability to go over its capacity, and so moving that to Conestoga in both cases keeps Conestoga within capacity. One of the other priorities mentioned was student body composition. I won't go into the details, but if you want to, you can look at the maps and see that that helps with the student body composition. And certainly it creates a peninsula crossing a railroad with that, and it's significantly more. You have a lot of hard decisions to make on the north end. I think there's an easy decision to make there on the south end tonight.
Thank you. Okay, Mary Beth.
Hello. I've read through parents' comments, and there are two themes that come up repeatedly: preserving community and walkability. I can sense the urgency and desperation in these comments from parents all over the district. The committee has a job in which the final outcome will affect many and please few. As we saw with the high school boundary process, BSD acknowledged the growth north of Highway 26, but built the high school in the far south. Likewise, with the new middle school, it was built as a swing school, and for years, was used as such, while miles northwest of it, there was continued growth and no accommodations were made for that growth. In fact, Sawto was almost full as soon as it opened. What is the compelling event that causes us to be here tonight? Timberland will be a regular middle school next year. Stoller is grossly overcrowded. Stoller currently has 7 portables, 300 students in them. The district moved portable after portable from other schools to Stoller, Band-Aid after Band-Aid, while ignoring the real issue of growth in the north. Stoller needs more real classrooms. Continue using Timberland as a swing school for part of Stoller while building real classrooms to replace the 7 portables. Then send those people back to Stoller, preserving their community. Figure out which elementary schools form communities. Some stand alone and some are coupled with others. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Carver.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your time, commitment, and consideration for all of us in the room tonight. My name is Michelle Carver. I'm an active parent in the Oak Hills community. I have a blended family, of 5 Beaverton School District students, 3 enrolled in the Southridge Zone, and 2 who were Westview and now are Sunset. I have a clear comparison of 3 children who have experienced 0 disruption from elementary to middle school to high school with clear feeders and a network of friends and parents they've known since kindergarten. Meanwhile, I have 2 children who I see the negative impact daily due to the boundary changes north of 26. Both on their mental and their emotional health. I live it every day with a sophomore and a 7th grader. We appreciate your attention and concern for the 25 students from Oak Hills who enter Sunset on a yearly average. Our area represents less than 1% of Sunset's 2,000 plus student body. High school's challenging enough without the added stress and anxiety caused by knowing only a handful of people while surrounded by long established networks of peers who oftentimes aren't open to making new friends. MAP A is a great option for Oak Hills to increase friendships with other Sunset-bound students. MAP B could be a home run for us if all of Oak Hills could attend Meadow Park and then continue to Sunset together. MAP C gives Oak Hills the chance to reunite as a community, but continues to isolate us from the rest of the Sunset-bound kids. We would still enter Sunset at quite a disadvantage as that token 1% of the student body. Please consider an option where Oak Hills can unite and also associate with a larger student body that would feed into high school together. We believe both can be achieved. This would not only benefit our kids' mental health, but also provide more space at Westview for future growth, which seems unstoppable. Oak Hills is a small school that remains so year after year. Surely we can stay within Sunset's boundaries.
Thank you. Okay. Min Pan Lee.
Ms. Parker and committee members, please remember why we sit here. We sit here to fulfill the new middle school. Please do not make the decision to waste the $60 million new middle school, a school specially built to reduce the overcrowding and Stoller. Anyone want to say 25 to 30% is not used the new school? I want to remind all the members the 4 criteria mentioned in the beginning of every meeting. Totally agree with Jason. Proximity is not equal walkable. A map that hasn't been clear rejected back only based on walkability. Why does it feel like we are taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back? Just because a member is from Jacob and she wants to keep her kids throwing a rock from her backyard? Well, the past 2 maps option can do that already. Totally agree with John. Let's move forward and rather than creating new maps. I believe that you have heard from everybody here, nobody wants splits. Neither the community members or the community. It is one of the common factors and mostly everyone seems to agree on. Brain map saying is a direct violation of what has been decided so far in every meeting. Map C splits 8 elementary schools. Please avoiding splits as much as you can when you make the decision. No kids want to split from their friends. Look at the transportation side. All maps reduce transportation cost, which is good for us already. Can you find any school cost more than moving Springville from the data you give us? The answer is no, clear and easy. The transportation officer is here and she said how he thinks about driving the whole Springville to the other side of Highway 26. Can we ask him how much travel time increased by moving Springville and how much he is willing to pay for the safety?
Okay, so
thank you.
Ms. Lee. Okay, thank you. All right, Samir Ruiwali, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name.
No, you said it just right. Good evening, committee. Thank you again for all your work. I'm Samir from the Findlay Elementary neighborhood. Just like to remind everybody in attendance today, $35 million. That was the budget deficit of BSD last year. When we think about that, and then we say walkability is a privilege and transportation doesn't matter, that doesn't fly. We have to prioritize walkability. It's not a privilege. It's something we need to encourage in our communities. Map C fixes walkability not just for Stoller, but across the district. It's the right thing to do. It's not a privilege. It's Portland, it rains, so we don't walk. That's not correct. It's Portland, it rains. That's why we walk. It doesn't snow. We don't have wind chill in the -30s like the Midwest. That's precisely why we put on a raincoat and we walk. My child walks to Stoller every day in 10, 15 minutes versus now getting put on a bus, adding to the district's costs, and being sent somewhere else. You want to keep elementary schools together? Great. Keep Findlay together at Stoller. If not, the split map still serves a lot of objectives, meets a good number of feeder patterns, and balances the schools across the district. Map C is the right option. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right. Look, if you can't handle it by being respectful, there's the door. All right. Anand, please come up.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's clear that maps A, B, and C are not equal when it comes to how they balance the priorities of the district in terms of equity, utilization, and cost. If you consider equity, Mr. Struckmeyer stated that middle schools work best when students encounter the kind of diversity that they see in the community. Both maps A and B reduce the percentage of students with free and reduced lunch at Stoller, turning both Stoller and Timberland into kind of a school for the rich. Meanwhile, map C does the opposite, while also lowering the percentages of students needing free reduced lunches to the 3 middle schools that are currently at the highest rates. So I think in that sense, map C is clearly the most equitable. In terms of utilization, Mr. Struckmeyer stated in his memorandum that when a student population goes below 800, programs get cut and students will suffer as a result. Map A has 3 middle schools that will be underutilized and not meet this minimum student population by 2025. Map B is even worse in terms of utilization because it has 2 schools being underutilized and 2 that are over their permanent capacity and their total capacity in 2021. And the picture doesn't get much better for Map B even in 2025. Map C has the best utilization out of all of the maps and is achievable in both 2021 and 2025. Finally, in terms of costs, Map C being put forward by the BSD staff and prepared with the assistance of the Transportation Department is clearly superior to the other maps in terms of overall number of bus routes, number of students riding the buses, and overall operating costs. So Personally, I would rather have my tax dollars being used to have more teachers and more resources in the classroom as opposed to transportation and busing costs that come with MAP A and B. So I strongly recommend the committee to move MAP C forward since it's the best one in terms of equity, utilization, and cost.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Kelly Ritt.
Hi there, I'm representing I may have just turned out, no. Okay, so I'm going to share a little personal story with you. I brought my own little map here. This is, I think, one of the original walkability maps, which is a huge concern for me. And anyway, so my little personal story here is I have a daughter who was at Rachel Carson at Timberland. We live 0.4 miles away from Timberland. She walked or rode her bike every day. I currently have a daughter at ACMA at Timberland. She currently walks or rides her bike every day. And we are currently not slotted to go to Timberland. We live in this tiny little section right here. And we can walk right there and go to Timberland. Or we can take a bus way over here to Meadow Park. And I would say that's true for our whole community at Terra Linda. It would be great for us to be able to stay together. It balances out, like people have said, the economic disparities, the community staying together, and also Cornell and Murray are awful. There is so much growth being packed in, it is extremely difficult to drive those roads. Having to send all of our students across Cornell and down Murray is awful. If we got sent to, thank you, Cedar Park, then we'd be driving right by Timberland to get there, which doesn't really make sense. So we from Terra Linda really support MAP C, and we thank you for all your efforts to make it very practical and socially acceptable in diversity, more diverse, and keeping our communities together. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, wait, I have 10 seconds. I just wanted to add that walking to school is great for the health of our kids, which is a huge passion for me, so I just want to add that in there.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm apologizing in advance. Suresh Sato.
Hello everybody. Good evening. Thanks for everything that you're doing here. I am a Sato parent, and like we emphasized last week and 2 weeks before that, we care about walkability a lot, mostly because our schools, from our place, we have trail system that's walkable. And Portland is the most bikeable city in US. It didn't get that way, you know, and also today's children are tomorrow's citizens. And biking.
Just be as loud as you can.
All right, so today's, I'm good. Today's students are tomorrow's citizens, and they're going to be biking in Portland. We set a wrong precedent if we put them in bus, and we can actually get them to walk or bike to school. So pretty much, thank you for putting MAP C together and taking our viewpoints into concern, our concerns into, taking our concerns into account. And for the same reason we don't like MAP B, we prefer MAP C. I'm not going to take all the time to rehash all the points that was eloquently pointed out by 2 or 3 other people before, so I'm going to give you back the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Amanda of Rock Creek, you're going to bring us home.
All right. Good evening. Thank you to all of the committee members for all of the work that you've put in on this, and all of the BSD employees as well who've provided all the data. The Rock Creek community cares very deeply about this process, and we've been committed to engaging in civil discourse in the appropriate venue about these issues. We strongly have concerns about the continuity of feeder patterns, bus commute times, preserving our community relationships, access to academic programs, and preserving or creating better economic diversity. And those all contribute to equitable experiences for our students. We therefore strongly urge the committee to abandon Map A. It creates a grossly inequitable result for our school and several of the schools in our neighboring communities. Map A sends the most economically disadvantaged portion of Stoller to Five Oaks. It also sends Rock Creek as the only northern school, complete northern school, without a neighboring community to Five Oaks, and creating an economically elite Stoller in the process. Map A also continues to send Bethany, which is our closest neighboring school, one of our closest neighboring schools, to Meadow Park, which increases busing costs and commute time for Bethany students over what Bethany families would experience at Five Oaks. Overall, Map A accomplishes precisely what BSD says they are trying to avoid: inequity. In addition, Map A requires the largest transportation budget of all three maps. So while transportation may not be the only issue we should consider, it should be one of the issues that we consider. Maps B and C, while some modifications may be made to either of them to accomplish some goals, both promote a more equitable result for Rock Creek by keeping them with at least one northern neighbor as they move to Five Oaks, and also considering commute times for our communities. A near consensus of northern parents is that we don't want our schools split up, and we want to stay with our communities no matter where we are sent.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our public testimony portion of the meeting, and what I'd like to do now is to have our committee to, you've said what you like, don't like about the three maps. You've said some things about what you would like to see with the maps. You've heard from the community. Is there anything else that you would like to say about any of the maps before I move on and ask Mr. McCracken to help me summarize some of the changes that we've been seeing? Anybody wanted to add anything else? John.
Just briefly, I would say, like it's been referenced several times by the committee members and by the community that we just heard, I was a little surprised by Map C at the start of this meeting or when we came out on Monday. But overall, I would say that is what we've asked of you, and that is to provide us your best understanding of opportunity. So I do appreciate that, and on reflection and upon listening to everything, I think we need to keep Map A and Map C, and we need to look at all four of the JC guidelines against those two, and really look at how can we balance them, and for example, very specifically, I would like for you to on Map C put back all of the elementary feeders if we can, if there's no other reasonable reason not to. So I think we've heard at least Shoals Heights, Rock Creek, and there's another one I can't think of right now. So let's put those back when we can and where we can, and then start to look at fine-tuning those two maps would be my recommendation.
Go ahead.
So in terms of feeders, there are some pre-existing feeder splits, like Raleigh Park. Would you like us to try and fix those as best we can, or prioritize
I think
the
so.
new splits?
I think I would, except for a couple instances where we heard from McKay, for example, I think they would prefer to stay split so that they can go to Conestoga, so leave that one. But I know we heard a lot of public comments from the Highland Park area, the Nancy Riles area, that they would like to have that one corrected. Okay. So there are, I'd say, make some discretion on logical based on the comments that we've heard.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle.
I agree that the elementary feeders, I believe McKay is the only one that has strongly said, please leave this split. And maybe Finley has said, if we can walk, we want to be split. But that one seems less clear. Some people are saying, keep us together. Some people are saying, let us walk. In any case, I too was surprised by Map C, but it's sort of grown on me after looking at the diversity and socioeconomic numbers. And I don't think we should disregard the high school change without speaking to those communities, because I agree we can't just change everything, but I'm hearing Oak Hill say, can we be together? And if we could make that change for them and they want it, and it would improve the overcrowding at Westview, then I don't see a reason why we shouldn't entertain that.
So let me address the high school issue, or the boundary issue, straight off. Jason talked about what our board was discussing on the board objectives, and he's absolutely right. The types of changes that we were talking about with the board were the, kind of grid code, small type of tweaks. If the committee were to recommend, and I'm just saying this as a hypothetical, if the committee were to say, yeah, we would like for you, school district, to consider moving Oak Hills as one over to Sunset. We would do that if our board agreed as a separate boundary process next year, because this middle school boundary will not be effective next year. And it would become effective at the same time if that were to move forward. So my advice, my direction to you is, as you look at this, keep in mind that a high school boundary may or may not happen. So if you want to recommend, hey, do this, understand it may not happen. So be a part of your calculus on what kind of recommendation you want to make. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Abhijit, I think yours was up next.
So I agree with John that if you remove the elementary splits in C, maybe it's worth considering, especially there's some elementaries in South and also Rock Creek and Friendly. So if you can make those whole and get the Stoller population to 90% in 2021, then at least we are making an honest attempt to meet both objective. And like you mentioned, please put the middle school to high school feeders as they would appear should the high school boundary change not go in effect. So we know if should that fail, how it would look. I mean, if these changes are on the table, then I think considering map C is viable. Otherwise, it's hard sell for me.
Okay. Mike.
Thanks, Steve. I'm a little confused as to the ask at this point in the meeting. I understood that the goal of tonight was to reduce the 3 maps to 2 maps moving forward. I mean, I could give you ideas of changes I'd like to see on all 3 maps, but I'm not sure that moves us towards what the goal of tonight's meeting is. As such, what I would propose is at this time we vote on which 2 maps to move forward. Then at the next meeting, I propose we start diving into the weeds on those 2 maps as to what types of changes we might like to see.
Right. So thank you for that. What I'd like to do is hear from people what specifically they would like. And as we finish that up, I do want to poll people about their preferences in maps moving forward. So, Christy, I think you were next.
So specifically with map C, there's been talk about removing elementary splits that are shown on map C right now. But especially around Beaverton High School, there's already elementary splits that are associated with the high school feeders. And so if you eliminate elementary to middle school splits, now you've introduced kind of weird splits at the high school level. So I guess I was curious if how people would think about grouping all of Raleigh Park together into Whitford and moving the small part of, I believe, Fir Grove that goes to Beaverton into Whitford. And then I really took to heart the comments about how Whitford really can't accommodate Rachel Carson as another program at their school. Maybe we could instead find a way to either keep it at Five Oaks or put it at Cedar Park. So I would like to see those changes made to map C.
The way I took your comment was the odd thumb being right here. That little bit is VOS.
Oh, that's Vos, okay.
Right, and not for Grove.
Okay.
So we could make it, in taking your comment, would be moving all of Vos to Whitford.
And the small part, is all of that area for Beaverton High School, is all of that Vos, or is some of that for?
So this little bit right over here is Chehalem.
Okay.
And that little bit is Vos.
Okay. I would like, okay.
That's one of those pre-existing splits that predated even the high school boundary process.
Okay.
Okay. Jason.
I'll make just a logistical proposal because, you know, at some point we've got to get down to specifics and move forward. My proposal is, you've heard Map C started as a district creation. I think you could take what you've heard and revise that. Rather than treat the voting as a choice between A and B, I think why don't we just pick one to say, okay, we're going to just talk about this one next time, or we're literally going zone by zone and seeing what we can agree on changes are. And it's not that we've discarded the other one, but I think unless we get down to the point of, hey, what can we agree on the walkable areas around Findlay in other zones, we're just not going to get there. And if we you know, get done with A, we could turn to B, we could turn to C. But I think let's just pick one and just say, hey, we're not voting any map out. We're just going to pick which one we're going to talk about next time and really try and get to the specifics. Okay.
Charisse.
I agree with Jason, and for me, I think that map is map C. I would like to talk about that. I think it's been loud and clear from the community and really from all of us that walkability is the priority place to start. And so if we can make that happen with the map that gives us the best transportation data, that gives us the best numbers in 2025, and that gives us the best walkability, I don't know why we wouldn't start there and do that process.
Okay. All right. Yasmin.
Yeah, on the same note of logistics, I find it sometimes difficult when we do all the changes to one map, it turns out into a new map.
Please pull that thing really close.
So I was saying that when we make all the changes that we discussed to one map, it turns into a new map. So is there a way that we can see each and every change that we suggest on the map, like map A1, AB, A2, and or B, or whichever map we're going to discuss? Because when all the changes are done together, all the features are gone, and we have brand new features to address.
So we can certainly do that. It's just yeah. I mean, if we're limiting our number of edits, we can certainly graphically make that pretty clear. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other cards up here right now. In the spirit of what Jason and Charisse have just said in terms of focusing our efforts in terms of reviewing materials, we've heard about a bunch of changes. What say you in terms of moving forward at the next meeting? Again, not throwing any map away, but at our next meeting, I'd like to hear what your first and second priority are, and that way we can focus our work. So I'm going to look at you, Jason, to kick us off. Not Jason, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I would say, back to my first comment, let's start with C and reduce as many splits as we can, keeping the logical splits that we've already discussed.
Right. And if we're able to get through C at the next meeting in a timely fashion, is there another between A and B you would prefer to see and spend time on?
A.
A. Okay. Sean.
At the next meeting, I would like to see map C, just because of the walkability, and if we have time, then map A.
Okay. Abdul?
Personally, for me, I think I favor starting on map A, and I would suggest that we rather look at the feeder patterns and utilization of the capacity. We've already built the schools. We have to fill them up. I think those are the two things I'll prioritize over walkability and transportation costs.
Okay.
So going forward, I want to see map A and have us discuss that in detail.
Okay. And as a secondary?
We could probably go with map C because people want to debate about that. So I'd like us to have that conversation.
Okay. Jason?
B then A. The idea I tried to pitch around C was it's a district creation. We've already pitched some ideas. Let them keep running with it. Again, it's still in the mix, but I think I'd rather poke at one of the other ones to start with to see where it goes and then compare it to C.
Okay. Yasmin?
My first priority would be C. I'm a little torn between A and B for my second priority.
Okay.
There are a lot of options.
All right. Mike?
Honestly, before hearing the testimony tonight, I was not a fan of C, but I've taken another look, so I'd say A and C.
A and C. All right. Jennifer?
For me, I would say A and C as well. Probably would be my order.
All right. I won't ask Mr. Beaver because I know what he'd want. Charisse?
Map C for me. And if I had to pick between the other two, and that is not a choice I want to make, it's A, and it's only because of the feeders.
Okay. Christy?
Map C and then map A.
Okay. Ratika?
I think C and A, but only if on A we can, the only problems that I have with A are like that some schools are under capacity and the equity problem.
Right. Okay. Monica?
I think I would prefer C as well, and I kind of blinked. If we could focus on kind of fixing some of the awkward elementary splits on the south side, those do bother me. If I had to pick between A and B, I'd go with A, but echo Ratika's sentiments.
Okay. Michelle?
I agree. I prefer C and then A.
Okay. Abhijit?
My preference is A, and in that with one change where you can add the friendly walkability and corresponding change to some grid course from Springville feeding into Five Oaks.
Right.
And you can move up the Mountain View boundary. So Five Oaks has the capacity to address that. So that's my first preference. And in map C, as I said, if you can remove the friendly split and Rock Creek split and get Stoller to 90% in 2021, at least we are making an attempt at achieve the board objective.
All right. Marnie?
I would echo that, A and then C for me, please.
Okay. All right. So we'll bring forward those. We're not dumping map B. We are going to focus our attention at the next meeting on February 13th down at Five Oaks on maps C and A, and if we have time we will go to B, but we'll focus on that. So our next meeting, February 13th at 6:30 at Five Oaks. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.